Battery sizing. Batteries are a fascinating aspect of the solar industry and could easily overshadow the solar industry in the years to come. But real applications of batteries are a little bit different than what you might initially expect. Many homeowners expect batteries to be an economic solution to resolve the mismatch between solar production, energy consumption, and grid policy. If a utility does not provide a good net metering policy, storing the energy on site in a battery to use later can lower the electric bill. Even without solar, if the utility has a time of day variable electric rate structure, it might be appealing to charge the battery during an off-peak time and use the battery during a peak time to lower the electric bill. But batteries do not have infinite life, and there is a real cost to buying and installing and running the battery. So let's assume the batteries of the Tesla Powerwall 2 comprise half of its $6,700 material cost, resulting in a $250 per kilowatt hour price of storage for the Tesla Powerwall 2. The Tesla Powerwall 2 is rated for 37,800 kilowatt hours of energy output, leading to a 9 cents per kilowatt hour hard cost, which does not include installation, sales tax, design fees, or any other project expenses aside from the hard cost of the batteries themselves. Utilities who are keenly aware of battery lifecycle costs can simply adjust their policies to render residential battery ownership as a luxury rather than a cost-effective expense. A time-of-day rate difference of 9 cents per kilowatt hour would result simply in the customer trading one bill for another, or even losing money if all the project expenses were fully calculated into that battery cost. An economic rate differential would have to be about twice that amount, or closer to 20 cents per kilowatt hour, in order for the battery in the long run to be a cost-effective investment for the battery owner. Of course, some customers will pay for this luxury to spite the electric company that fails to provide them with good solar policy. Others will value the utility of having some backup electrical storage on site. But the point is that it's very hard to make batteries economic under most residential electric rates. Lead acid is cheaper, but generally speaking, lead acid is only cost effective when storing multiple days worth of electricity, an expensive proposition for any customer. It is an expense off-grid customers will pay for because they have to, not because they want to, in order to avoid some even greater cost of expanding the grid out to their point of use. Sizing a battery for off-grid operation is a relatively simple matter. Take 12 months of electric bills and divide by the days in each month to get an average power consumption per day. Summer and wintertime extremes require special attention. Remember PVWatts from earlier? PVWatts data can be exported into a spreadsheet, revealing the solar production figures that are not only monthly, but also for each hour of the day. PVWatts models typical weather for a given month, and so will reveal how many cloudy days in a row a customer should expect for their off-grid setting. Beware that PVWatts will not model an unusual hurricane or blizzard, but that is what a backup gas generator is for on an off-grid site. In my off-grid models, I start by guessing the battery size and seeing how it impacts the model. Then I recharge the battery capacity with the hourly solar production figures from PVWatts and subtract out the hourly load consumption that I calculate from the monthly electric bills. I then model a few different battery and array sizes as well as generator capacity and runtime to ensure the battery bank does not run out of power at any point in the year. For off-grid planning, I think it's best to design the system to not need a gas generator, such that the generator is only there for backup. That said, I work in the southern half of the USA. In the extreme north part of the USA, it is easier to assume that a few days of generator use will be necessary in the winter. In any event, it is useful to plot solar production, building consumption, generator use, and battery capacity on a graph throughout the year. At some point, the solar array will be large enough to where increasing its size further won't yield any more energy advantage. While solar will produce power on overcast days, that largely depends on how thick the clouds are. So there will be periods of time when the solar array is not productive during the day. Increasing the size of the solar array on that day does the client no good. If off-grid living is not desired, a well-sized residential battery might be sized to eliminate solar outflow onto the grid. As a rule of thumb, batteries that store 2/3 of a solar array's daily summer production will be large enough to stop an array from outflowing onto the grid. And again, for anything smaller than multiple days of storage, I'd recommend lithium-ion, even if cost forces the customer into second life batteries from the electric vehicle market rather than buying new. Without getting into those details, lead-acid batteries cannot be discharged as quickly as lithium-ion without significant efficiency loss. So a lead-acid battery which stores anything less than 2 to 3 days worth of power will not lend good results to the end user. Also, be aware that most homes, particularly all-electric homes, will use more instantaneous power than what a single residential battery inverter will output. But battery inverters are expensive, so solar inverters are only one way in that they take all the solar production and push it out onto either the load or the electric grid. Whereas a battery inverter is two ways in that it both charges and discharges the battery. That makes battery inverters cost about twice as much as their batteryless one-way counterparts, which makes the project all the more expensive if whole house battery backup on battery inverters' power is required. Today, common solar battery inverters will only back up critical loads rather than output their power to the whole house. And because new residential lithium-ion batteries can cost over $300 a kilowatt hour just for the battery itself, most solar customers are only purchasing enough storage to power a house for a few hours rather than a few days. All that said, this is an emerging market that is rapidly evolving. Some companies are focusing on load controls to manage a building's electrical load during battery operation in order to better allow for whole house power during a grid outage by making sure not all the appliances in the home turn on at the same time. More on that later. At any rate, storing 2/3 of the daily summertime production of a solar array strikes a good balance of keeping most of the solar electricity on site for consumption while providing enough power to the home during emergencies, whether it be powering a critical load or powering the entire house for a few hours. Commercial customers have a more optimistic picture for batteries. Larger commercial customers are billed differently for electricity than residential customers, which creates a cost savings opportunity. Maybe half of a commercial electric bill is the kilowatt hour energy rate. The other half, and it varies wildly, is measured in kilowatt demand charges, which bill the commercial user for the 15-minute maximum peak power use of the entire month. Let's assume that half of a commercial electric bill results from the maximum 15-minute power draw of a building. The obvious solution is to use the battery during that period of maximum demand only. If the building does not experience its peak demand during the day, then the solar array component might not even be needed. And a battery that offsets 5% of a building's energy use might reduce its electric bill by 25% or more, a 1 to 5 payoff. Compare that against a batteryless, net-metered residential solar array, which produces 100% of a building's energy use and offsets the bill by 100%. That's a 1 to 1 payoff. So to understand that commercial batteries with or without solar have the potential for much better economics than batteryless residential solar, or even residential solar with batteries for that matter. If a commercial solar battery were designed to eliminate 100% of the electric bill, it would only save at a 1 to 1 ratio. But ironically, if the project were smaller and only targeted peak demand, the project becomes more cost-effective. This requires substantial modeling based on building interval data that can be obtained either directly from the utility or through logging into the building's electrical account online and downloading it directly. I then model my solar battery peaker plant in a spreadsheet similar to my off-grid designs. But on a real project, I'll use the commercial design software Energy Toolbase to hone in on the optimal configuration. The building load profile is literally the shape of the building's power use throughout the day. The load profile gets spikier towards the top and levels out as the building transitions from peak load to base load. The most cost-effective commercial solar battery only targets the spikiest of peak loads to provide the greatest demand savings for the smallest system purchased. So almost every commercial facility on a demand charge can install a small, cost-effective lithium-ion battery for demand management with or without solar.